You believe you are free. You wake up, make choices, move through your day as if your decisions belong to you. But what if they don't? What if every preference, every impulse, every thought passing through your mind is merely the echo of a system that has already determined your actions before you even realize them? Neuroscience suggests that decisions form in the subconscious long before we consciously choose them. Benjamin Liebet's experiments in the 1980s revealed something disturbing. The brain registers an action milliseconds before the individual becomes aware of deciding it. This implies that free will, at least in the way we perceive it, is nothing more than an afterthought, our consciousness taking credit for what the mind has already set into motion. And yet, we cling to the belief that we are in control. We need this illusion because without it, existence becomes unbearable. If we are not truly the authors of our choices, then what are we? Machines running scripts? Puppets pulled by unseen strings? Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free." But what if the true condemnation is the opposite, that we are enslaved while believing we are free? Consider your daily life. You walk into a store, convinced you are selecting a product based on your personal preference. But how much of that choice is truly yours? Marketing psychologists understand that your brain can be nudged in ways you don't perceive. Colors, scents, even the placement of items on a shelf, all carefully designed to lead you toward a specific action, while making you believe it was entirely your own decision. The same happens in relationships, careers, political beliefs. You inherit ideas from your culture, your family, your experiences, all shaping a worldview that feels authentic, but is, in reality, a construct built from outside influences. Carl Jung warned of this when he spoke of the collective unconscious, the inherited psychological structures that dictate how we see the world before we even have the chance to question it. But what about rebellion? What about those who reject the system, who claim to think independently? Even those who resist often do so within predefined frameworks, exchanging one set of chains for another. The rebel who turns against tradition often does so in predictable ways, following scripts written by past revolutionaries. The belief in absolute individuality is a mirage. Whether we comply or resist, we are still playing roles shaped by forces beyond our awareness. The illusion is so deep that even questioning it feels futile. If every thought is conditioned, then even the thought of escaping is part of the trap. How do you break free from a prison when you are not even sure where its walls begin or end? Dostoevsky, in Notes from Underground, portrayed a man consumed by the awareness of his own lack of control, yet unable to act outside of it. He knew he was bound by invisible forces, but knowledge alone did not grant him freedom. Perhaps that is the true horror, not that we lack free will, but that we will never know to what extent we are controlled. The strings are hidden too well, woven into the very fabric of our existence. The more we struggle against them, the tighter they seem to hold. The question is, do you truly want to see them? Or is it easier to remain blind, believing the choices you make are your own? You were born into a system that has shaped you in ways you have never questioned. From the moment you took your first breath, invisible chains began to form around your mind, weaving themselves into your thoughts, your desires, your very identity. Society does not need physical bars to imprison you. It has perfected a far more insidious method: control through conditioning. You do not feel trapped because the walls of your cage are painted to look like freedom. You do not resist because you have been taught that there is nothing to resist. The most effective prison is the one its captives never realize they are in. Think of the beliefs you hold most dear. Your sense of right and wrong, your ambitions, your fears. Where did they come from? Were they born within you, or were they carefully implanted by the culture that raised you? A child does not choose their religion, their values, or their language. These things are programmed into them before they have the capacity to think critically, and yet, as they grow, they come to believe that these inherited beliefs are their own. Nietzsche warned of this deception, arguing that morality itself is often nothing more than the internalized voice of those in power, masquerading as absolute truth. What you consider to be your most personal convictions might, in reality, be the echoes of a system designed to keep you in line. The illusion is reinforced at every level. Education does not teach you how to think. It teaches you what to think. Schools do not encourage true questioning. They provide acceptable parameters for inquiry, ensuring that the fundamental structures of society remain unchallenged. The workplace operates in the same way, rewarding conformity and punishing deviation. Even entertainment serves this function, lulling you into passivity with distractions that keep you from ever pausing to ask, what am I really doing with my life? Even your desires have been scripted for you. The things you chase, wealth, status, relationships, were all assigned value by the system long before you ever considered pursuing them. You believe you are striving toward goals of your own choosing, but in reality, you are simply fulfilling the role you were conditioned to play. The perfect citizen is not one who is physically restrained, but one who willingly obeys, never realizing they were trained to do so. The philosopher Erich Fromm described this phenomenon as automaton conformity, where people mistake socially acceptable choices for genuine individuality. You believe you are different, unique, free, when in reality, you are simply following a pattern that has been laid out for you since birth. But what happens when someone dares to step outside of these invisible chains? Society does not respond with open force, but with something far more powerful: isolation. To question the system is to risk exile, to be labeled an outcast, a failure, a madman. The fear of rejection is enough to keep most people in line. We crave belonging so deeply that we would rather live in illusion than face the loneliness of waking up. This is why most never escape. They are not physically imprisoned, but psychologically enslaved. The bars are made of expectations, the chains forged from the fear of being alone. And yet, despite all of this, the system's greatest trick is making you believe that you are the one in control, that every choice you make is entirely yours, that the life you live is the result of your own decisions, rather than the culmination of countless manipulations designed to ensure that you never even consider another path. But now that you have seen the prison, the question remains: will you ignore it and continue as before, or will you dare to test the weight of your chains? Your mind is not your own. This is not a metaphor or a philosophical abstraction. It is a biological fact. Your thoughts, your desires, even your sense of self are products of neural pathways shaped by experiences, conditioning, and unconscious influences you cannot perceive. The latest discoveries in neuroscience reveal an unsettling truth. Your brain is a machine operating on patterns, habits, and pre-programmed responses. The control you think you have is an illusion. Your consciousness is not the driver, it is the passenger, narrating the journey, while the true mechanisms of your mind remain hidden beneath the surface. Scientists studying decision-making have found that your brain often decides what you will do before you are even aware of it. The famous Libet experiment demonstrated that neural activity predicting a choice begins several milliseconds before the subject consciously decides. This suggests that what we perceive as free will is simply the mind rationalizing a choice that has already been made at a subconscious level. Neuroscientist David Eagleman expands on this, arguing that much of what we consider to be rational thought is, in reality, the result of hidden mental processes beyond our control. You believe you are making a decision, but in truth, your brain is following patterns dictated by genetics, past experiences, and social conditioning. Your habits are not random. They are encoded in neural pathways that strengthen with repetition. Every action you take, every belief you reinforce, deepens the grooves in your mind, making it harder to break free from established patterns. This is why change feels so difficult. Your brain resists it, preferring the familiar over the unknown. Psychologists call this the default mode network, the part of the brain that keeps you trapped in habitual thinking, making sure you stay within the boundaries of what feels comfortable. Even when you try to break free, you often find yourself repeating the same cycles, making the same mistakes, drawn back into the same behaviors as if by an invisible force. The implications are disturbing. If your brain is wired to operate on autopilot, then how much of your life is truly under your control? When you feel anger, was that emotion consciously chosen, or was it triggered by deep-seated responses you had no part in creating? When you fall in love, is it a rational decision, or is your brain executing a biological program designed for reproduction and survival? Even your sense of identity, the idea that you are a singular, coherent self, is an illusion created by the mind to maintain continuity. In reality, your thoughts, moods, and behaviors fluctuate depending on context, external stimuli, and brain chemistry. The you that exists today is not the same you from a decade ago, nor will it be the same you in the future. The self is not a solid entity, but a shifting construct, held together by memory and the illusion of narrative consistency. Jung spoke of the unconscious as a vast hidden force, shaping our actions without our awareness. He warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. But how do you fight against something you cannot see? If your very thoughts are influenced before you are aware of them, then even the act of questioning this reality might itself be predetermined. This is the paradox of control. You seek to escape the system, but the tool you use to escape is part of the system itself. The more you struggle, the more you realize that every step you take has already been accounted for by the mechanisms that shape your mind. And so the question remains, if even rebellion is scripted, what does true freedom look like? And more importantly, do you actually want it? If everything is manipulation, if every thought is conditioned, then what does it mean to escape? Can you truly break free from a system when the very tools you use, your mind, your logic, your instincts, have all been shaped by that same system? This is the paradox of awakening. The moment you realize the prison exists, you also realize that there is no clear way out. Freedom is not simply the absence of control, it is the ability to recognize the forces at play and consciously navigate them. But is that even possible? Or is the desire for freedom itself just another layer of the illusion? Another carefully placed mechanism designed to keep you engaged, to make you feel as if escape is within reach when, in reality, every exit leads you back inside. There are those who claim they have broken free, rejecting societal norms, abandoning programmed desires, seeking solitude or radical independence. But are they truly liberated? Or have they simply switched one form of control for another? The so-called free thinker often becomes trapped in a different kind of psychological prison, one where they are defined not by conformity, but by opposition. They still live in relation to the system, defining themselves against it rather than outside of it. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this when he spoke of the danger of staring too long into the abyss, the risk that in fighting the monster, one might become a monster in return. Rebellion, when it becomes an identity, is just another form of enslavement. True escape, if it exists at all, does not come from rejecting the system outright, but from understanding it so deeply that you can move within it without being unconsciously ruled by it. This requires an unsettling level of self-awareness, an ability to recognize your own biases, to see the hidden forces shaping your thoughts, to question every impulse and belief, not out of paranoia, but out of genuine curiosity. It is the path of those willing to dismantle themselves, to strip away every layer of conditioning, even if what lies beneath is terrifyingly uncertain. Carl Jung spoke of this as the process of individuation, or the journey of integrating the unconscious mind, making peace with the shadows rather than being unknowingly controlled by them. But this path is not for everyone. Most will never attempt it, not because they lack intelligence or willpower, but because they lack the desire. The illusion of freedom is comfortable, and breaking it requires a level of existential discomfort that few are willing to endure. To awaken is not simply to see the prison, it is to realize that you were never separate from it, that it exists not just around you but within you. It is to understand that freedom is not about rejecting control, but about becoming conscious of it, about choosing your chains rather than being blindly bound by them. And so, the question remains not whether you are being controlled, because you are, but whether you are willing to see it, to confront it, and to decide, fully aware, whether to remain within the illusion or to walk the far more difficult path of true awareness. The door to your prison has never been locked. The real question is, do you have the courage to step through it?